probably less than a minute or two, because time slows down when you're going through events like that. So let me open it up for you to answer questions. Also, how you, and just kind of in terms of modeling, how are you doing? Because if you can't talk about how you're doing, how you expect your kids who are dealing with this stuff to be able to talk about how they're doing. And that's really important, because you are here because you worry, and for parents, you're not in control. And that's probably one of the worst feelings that you can probably deal with, is just the lack of control.
I have one question.
Mm-hmm.
If somebody did go through the post-traumatic stress that you were talking about, and they do speak about it, let's say to their friends, are they still symptomatic? Do they still have it?
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily.
No, symptoms develop when you don't deal with it. If they're dealing with it with their friends, that's fine.
Is there a way to prevent it?
Is there a way to prevent it? That's a good question. I wish I knew.
Oh, man, if you speak to your son before he goes in, or while he's in, and say, these things, this is what happens sometimes to people. Be aware of your feelings, be aware what's going on around you. Does that help?
I think developing resilience helps. In other words, being able to figure out what gives you resilience in life. I mean, for some people, it's going down the block, going into the synagogue, putting on tefillin, and davening. For other people, it may be going to the ocean and just surfing. What people have to find what gives them meaning and what brings them, gives them strength in terms of resilience. And I think that's really the ultimate goal, is develop resilience, develop styles of thinking about what you're doing to give it meaning. So just for someone who's had to handle, like, going into some of these houses and having to deal with some of the bodies, understanding that what they're doing is they're giving comfort to the family. I know this is hard, but they're giving comfort to the families. They're helping find a final resting place for these young people who were murdered, butchered, and that someone has to do this job, and for whatever reason they're in that situation. There's a reason why they're there. Now, sometimes we like to say that God gives us stuff that we can handle, but that's not always true, and I know that that's not always true. But being able to put a context on whatever it is that you're doing, whatever you have to do to give it a positive spin, a positive meaning in a very, very difficult situation, is going to be helpful. And again, I think to answer Herman a little bit, I mean, I think you have to really give people time. This doesn't happen overnight. It takes time, and you have to give people time to kind of process. So when you asked about, do we do it immediately? No, we do the diffusing, maybe just giving comfort to the soldier early on, and then we do debriefing, in which we try to help them develop a different narrative. And in that group, when we're doing those groups, someone over here will say something that makes a difference to someone over there. And that's what we try to do. We try to develop a narrative, a story that will give context and meaning to what people are doing. Will that always work? No, it won't always work. Sometimes, regardless of what we do, you're going to have to deal with some of the symptoms of PTSD. Sleeplessness is a big issue for a lot of veterans. First of all, being in the Army teaches you not to sleep. right? And then when you have trauma and you have nightmares, you begin to not sleep at all, and that just makes everything worse. So developing a good sleep routine, like a good sleep routine where you go to sleep, you know, when you're tired, and you have a set wake up time, and you wake up at that time every morning, regardless of your night before, helps develop a good sleep pattern. So developing good sleep patterns. Now, many of these soldiers have young children at home, and I know that sometimes it makes it even more difficult. So whatever you can do to get good sleep, that makes a difference. Sometimes medication helps. It's not the best thing in the world to have to do for the rest of your life, but you know, sometimes we use antidepressants to help people handle these events. Depression is a comorbid problem with PTSD. Depression, anxiety, sleeplessness. I mean, it's complicated. But talking about it, providing emotional support, having social support really makes a difference. Having faith makes a difference. Can't tell you how many of my firefighters and police officers, when they tell me they go to church every Sunday and they're like, they don't smoke, they don't drink, and that helps them. I believe it. I really do. Any questions?
Can you address the social media and constant news update side of this?
Oh,
and
good
also,
question.
I just want to another little point. I think what you're talking about as far as like confronting the events that have occurred and not letting them like fester in the back of your mind.
Mm-hmm.
Like to some degree, you can say, oh well, seeing the atrocities that have really been displayed everywhere might be good for you, because then you're confronting what has actually happened as opposed to burying it and at some point it shocks you. It could be a logical way to think about it. I don't know. Can you respond to those?
Yeah, it's an interesting point that you bring up, because I understand the Israeli government is telling people to delete this social media now. I agree with not showing this stuff to children. I mean, how do people deal with, children are, somebody asked me if I deal with children. I don't deal with children, I deal with parents, right? How you respond to your children makes a difference. They feel your anxiety, they feel your stress. So trying to do things to calm yourself, like meditation, and things like Headspace, really, I mean, these things, meditation works, yoga works, getting physical activity helps, not smoking or drinking too much helps. So the issue of social media is, I've been watching it the last few days with myself and with everybody who I'm close with. Everybody's on their phones. I actually think that Friday night to Saturday night will be a very helpful experience of not being on your social media, and not being on your phones. And I really do encourage really taking little vacations from looking at the situation on the ground is not going to change immensely from minute to minute, and holding your phone and looking at your phone 24/7 isn't going to help. Now I'm guilty. I'm as guilty. I raise my hand and say I'm as guilty as everybody else, but I've been trying to take mini breaks from looking at the news feed. So I encourage people to really, if it